Okay, so yeah, today I'm going to talk about LibGDX, which is an open source Java-based cross-platform game development framework. And yeah, so first I'll talk about a bit about myself and my involvement with the project. So I started working in the games industry at Crytek as an AI games programmer, and we were working on Home from the Revolution, and I was doing like open world NPC behaviors. And I was all C++ and stuff like that, and spent about 2 years over there. Then I moved on to Sony and was working on a multimedia application for PlayStation 4 as well. And yeah, that was also C++. And after that, I was like 6 months over there, and after that, I left the games industry as a day job and went to Bloomberg. So we make like, well, Bloomberg, for those who don't know, it's like a finance news company. And yeah, I work on a market monitoring tool in real time. But yeah, on the side, I've always been making small games and stuff, and that's how I came across LibGDX. So I started making this small math game. It's like a puzzle game for kids. It took me over 5 months after my full-time job, and tried to do the whole thing, like art, all the code, and a bit of marketing and stuff. It's available for free. There's no ads and stuff, so it was just a bit of an experiment. And I've been using LibGDX as well for game jams. So I don't know if you know Loom there, but it's like a 48-hour game coding competition, and you have to do everything from scratch on your own. So I made I think I joined 3 times. So yeah, very small games like 2D stuff. I use LibGDX for all of them. And yeah, and then I think in 2013 I joined the LibGDX core development team, and we're about 20 developers, I think, last time I checked. And I've been mostly involved with the APIs for level loading. Like, you can create maps on some external tool, and then we have a maps API that parses that and then does all the rendering, and you can query objects on the map and things like that. And because I don't have a lot of time, I mostly do code reviews now, like all the pull requests that come in. So I'm involved with that. And yeah, it's been a great experience so far. As well, I'm the core maintainer the main maintainer for Ashley, which is a component-based entity system, and it's part of the libgdx family. So I don't know if you know about entity systems, but basically, rather than having your game objects your game objects design in a inheritance-based model, where you have a game object and you have the player, and then you end up with a massive inheritance hierarchy. You could just have an entity which is an ID and a bag of components, and the components are just data. So it's like velocity, position, mass, things like that. And then you have systems that process entities that have a certain family of components. So your movement system would process entities that have a position and a velocity, and it makes for a very clean code and very clear split of logic and data, and it's quite nice. But yeah, and I also wrote a LibGDX book. It's like a collection of articles on how to use LibGDX with examples and stuff. And all the code is available in GitHub, and we update it with every LibGDX release. So yeah, now on to LibGDX, and here's the part where I try to sell you the framework. So yeah, like I said, LibGDX is cross-platform. It's Java-based, but it's very, very fast, because actually if you look at on GitHub, I think 50% of the code is C and C++. So it's mostly native code for the most performance critical stuff. And the cool thing is that it's also compatible with all the JVM based languages, so Java, Scala, and all the other ones. And then it has like nightly releases, so if you want to be like on the bleeding edge, and then there's like monthly stable releases. We have a Jenkins, several Jenkins jobs running tests and things like that, so it's nicely maintained and it's nicely kept. And yeah, it's not a game engine, so it's not like Unity or Unreal. It's a game framework, so it's basically you can cherry pick the components that you want to use. So if you don't want collisions, you don't need to run any of that code. So you want the low-level stuff, you only use the low-level stuff. It doesn't impose, like for instance, Unity has this object model that you need to use. It's forced onto you. So here you can use Ashley or you can use an inheritance-based model. It doesn't matter. So yeah, and you can write your code once in Java and it deploys pretty much everywhere. So yeah, like Java, so Windows, Linux, and Mac, and then it deploys to Android. It deploys straight away to iOS through raw VM, and also through GWT. It exports to JavaScript, like very optimized JavaScript, and it can run on any WebGL-enabled browser. So that's very nice. And then it doesn't impose any editor or tools. So it uses Gradle for the build, and then you have your Gradle script, and you can import it on any IDE. You can use Eclipse, you can use IntelliJ, whatever, NetBeans, or you can use the command line or whatever editor you fancy. So that's quite nice as well. And the question is like, oh, with all these open source technologies, do people actually use it like professionally and for commercial projects? So here's a few examples. So this game is halfway. It's like kind of a 2D version of XCOM, and I think it released like last year or something. And it's 2 programmers, 1 artist, and it's all LibGDX. And it has it's very, very good, and it's on Steam, and it's a commercial project. And as far as I know, it's been fairly successful. There's also Delver, for instance, which has some 3D features as well. So that's also on Steam. And a particular one, I think it's pretty impressive, is Spine. It was a Kickstarter project, and it's by the guy who wrote the 2D, like the UI toolkit for LibGDX, and it's an animation tool. So it's a 2D animation tool. So rather than having sprites, you have like an atlas with like the pieces of your character, and then you have a skeleton like in 3D animation, and you have keyframes, so you interpolate between the keyframes, and the textures follow the bones, and it's quite to kind of design animations very quickly, and it's an incredibly complex piece of software, and it's all written in LibGDX, all the UI, obviously the graphics, everything. And that's, I think on Kickstarter it was like $50 to support it, and now it sells for $300. So it's a pretty big piece of commercial software. In terms of statistics of how many people use it, this is from AppBrain, so I don't know if it's very reliable, but 1.56% of all the apps in Google Play are made with LibGDX, which is quite high. I think the only games engine or framework that has a higher share is Unity. I think it's 4%. But yeah, LibGDX is the second one. So it's definitely widely used. The good thing is that it's open source and it's free. So all the LibGDX developers do all the work, and you get all the money, make all the profits, and get rich on us. So it's very nice. And also, advantages of being open source, like if there's a bug, I'm sorry, I'm picking on Unity, but if there's a bug on Unity, like you're on your own, you have to wait for someone for the Unity developers to fix it. With LibGDX, you can just look at the code, submit a pull request. A lot of people do that, and I think LibGDX is, at some point, it was the most forked Java project on GitHub. It's like 3,000 forks, and there's it was started like 7,000 times, crazy. So yeah, and a lot of people contribute, and yeah, that's quite nice. A lot of bugs get picked up very quickly, and if someone finds a bug, they can just send a pull request and it gets accepted. So yeah, to create a project is very easy. There's like this small UI, and you say, oh, this is the name of my main class, this is the name of my game, I want to deploy to these platforms, I want to use these third-party libraries, and you click a button and it generates all the Gradle scripts for you, and then you can import that into your IDE, so that's quite nice. That's very easy to use. In terms of the architecture, so there's LibGDX, and it has a core set of well, there's a core set of interfaces, and then each backend, each platform implements their own backend. So for the desktop, we use the lightweight Java library framework, and that's just based on OpenGL. And that's all the desktop platforms. And then for Android, it just uses OpenGL ES and all the Android, well, the Android SDK basically. For the iOS version, it uses RowVM, which is another open source project that takes your Java code and transpiles it into Objective-C, and then you can run it like binary code on iOS. And then the HTML5 backend is just GWT, Google Web Toolkit. It's another open source library by Google, and you can just take, like I said, you can just take Java code and compile it, translate it into JavaScript, and then you can run that on any WebGL browser. It doesn't support the whole of Java, so I think reflection is limited, but libGDX has a reflection API, so you can use that instead. And there are some other APIs, some parts of the Java standard library that are not available, but mostly it's supported. And in terms of the feature, in terms of the features, so like I said before, you can cherry pick whatever you want, and it's kind of broken down into low-level, mid-level, and high-level APIs. So if we go through the low-level stuff, there's application management, so like bringing up a window, handling all the events, like, the game is initialized, the game is paused, the game is gonna update, it's gonna render, the whole render loop. It has an API for file inputs and outputs. You can write files, read from files, read from like local storage, external storage, SD cards, whatever you want. That might be limited on WebGL, for instance, on browsers. But yeah, in other platforms it's available. As a networking API, you can just work with sockets, and yeah, it's very, very, very easy to use. As an audio API, you can play like background music, or you can play small audio effects, and it supports like most formats. So that's not a problem either. For graphics, it has it uses OpenGL, the OpenGL API. I think it supports up to, I think it was 3 last time I checked, and yeah, I mean you can use the higher level abstractions, but you can just access the whole OpenGL API. You can just play around with OpenGL yourself, which is quite useful if you want to do like shaders and more low-level stuff. And then it has an input API, so it supports like touch screens, gamepads, keyboard, mouse, everything you might need. In mid-level, for the 3D part, it supports meshes, like I said, shaders before, textures, atlases, sprites. It supports polygon batching, so you basically can say you have a texture atlas with all the sprites, all the characters that you have, and then you can say draw this one here, draw this one over there, and it doesn't talk to the graphics card in the meantime. So it's very fast. Basically, you send all the draw calls once, and then at the end, it pushes everything to the graphics card. That makes it faster than a lot of the C++ game frameworks that are out there, just because it does batching. So that's quite nice. Yeah, texture atlases, like I said, bitmap fonts, so font rendering. It comes with like bitmap font generation tools, so it's very easy to use. There's an asset manager, so it does all the reference counting for you. It does like asynchronous asset loading. You can have your nice loading bar, stuff like that. Math library for collisions, like shape intersections, things like that. It has a custom collections library, so you don't have to use the Java standard ones that do a lot of memory allocations. LibGDX tries to do no memory allocations while the game is running. So it doesn't generate any garbage. So these custom collections like array, maps, things like that, are specifically designed for games. So it doesn't spin the garbage collector. It has like JSON, XML serialization, deserialization functionality as well. And in the high level stuff, so it comes with Box2D for physics or Bullet for 3D. It has the map loading API that I worked on. There's a 2D scene graph for managing your game scenes, and it has an UI toolkit, so like buttons, things like that. It has all the components, and then it has a high-level 3D API, which is not as mature as the 2D stuff because it came at a later stage, but it's ready to use as well. LibGDX supports a bunch of extensions, so people contribute like their own libraries, and maybe they don't make it into the core, but they come as part of like third-party libraries, and some of them are, you can select them from the setup tool. So Box2D is a third-party library. Box2D lights for dynamic 2D lighting, which is quite cool. There's an AI third-party library as well for game controllers, for free type fonts, things like that, and you can write your own. There's one for in-app purchases, so that could be quite useful. And one of the problems with developing in Java is that you have like your jar package at the end, and you need to rely on someone having the right version of the JVM installed, and that doesn't always work. So there's packr, which is a tool that also lives within the LibGDX environment. It's just a command line tool that you can run, and you pack runtime environments, Java runtime environments, the one that your game works with your jar, and then it creates like an exe file or a binary file that's ready to run. So that's what you could distribute on desktop platforms. And people say, oh yeah, it's an open source framework, so I bet it's not documented. But the wiki that's on GitHub has like 80 articles, has Java docs for all of the APIs. There's a bunch of online tutorials. It's obviously the book that I wrote, but there's like forums and things like that. So people who have problems with it can just ask, and everyone helps. So it's very easy to get help on LibGDX. And it's also got a really good community. Sometimes with open source projects, I'm sure you've seen like posts from the Linux kernel mailing list with Linus Torvalds being very upset and insulting people and things like that. So that doesn't happen in LibGDX. Like people send small pull requests. Maybe they're not great because they're new to the project. So people say, oh, maybe you should change this, blah blah. People who come asking for help are very welcome. There's a IRC chat. There's the forums. Yeah, people just open an issue and send a pull request. So that's quite good. I think in the last month there were 20 merge pull requests and 60, I think over 60 issues active. So it's a very active project, and you can see the GitHub where you get like like 5-10 commits a day sometimes. So it's a very active project. And yeah, I was gonna do a small demo. I have, if it works. So I have Eclipse, a project here, and it's like the Flappy Bird kind of clone with a plane. So you can see you have like the under project, the core project where all the logic lives, and you have your desktop project, HTML and iOS. So all the code for the game is actually here. You don't need to touch anything on the other projects. But then you can, I cannot see here. You can run it from here. If you run the desktop project, you can just run it as a Java application. It's a launcher. And it's here. So yeah, it's like very simple game. So it comes with a bunch of examples. I'm really bad at this, so I'll close it now. But there's a bunch of finished small games that you can just clone from GitHub, and they're like full examples of how to use LibGDX. So it adds to the documentation, and you can see the code it's I think like 300 lines less, more or less. So yeah, it's pretty good, and yeah, I think that's all I had. So contact details, I think they'll send them around or something. Yeah, so thanks very much.